All right, and our strategists are what we call generalists. Generalist, that's an S. Oh boy, that's even worse. Generalists. They're called R strategists. Right? These are the ones that can be found in many locations. Okay, they're opportunistic. They'll come in. They'll take over. Okay, so R strategists. Their strategy is ready. They're usually small. They usually have a very high biotic potential. Okay. They usually have few limiting factors. Very few limiting factors. They are usually the prey. Okay. They're usually short-lived. Okay. And the idea here is, and we can go back up to the chart just before, and you can add more if you wanted to, but generally these R strategists are the ones that can be found in any location throughout the entire world, in most cases. I shouldn't say the entire world, but in many, many, many different ecosystems and many different biomes. Like, for example, the mouse. All right, you can find it everywhere. You find it all around the world. They're generalists. We basically have all of our Pennsylvania wildlife as generalists. So these guys are important to understand because these are the ones that we want to control their population, not actually have to worry about them becoming endangered, because they have all of these variables, okay, that help them survive in many conditions, and they usually, all right, are able to withstand tremendous stress within an environment. All right, so they're very difficult for us to make endangered and or have go extinct. Excuse me. Now, moving to the other type, a little bit different, actually the complete opposite. And those are the K strategists. The K strategists are what we call specialists. All right? And you can go through and just do the opposite of the other ones I talked about. All right, but most importantly, these have very specific food requirements. I like to say that. That's a big one. Food requirements. Very specific food requirements. They are very specialized in their location, found only in small areas. Okay, usually what we call endemic. These are the guys who have much longer lives. They have a very low biotic potential. And basically, to save time, they're the opposite. All right. These are the ones that we have to worry about when we talk about wildlife populations. These are the ones whose populations can be harmed very easily. And you can talk about, like, for example, whales, where a whale can only have 2 to 3 young every 10 years. That's its biotic potential. So by killing 1 whale or 2 whales, you could be hurting an entire 10-year generation. Whereas killing 1 mouse or 2 mice has very little impact on their overall ability to survive and have a population. All right, so the idea of K strategists and R strategists are critical. All right, and make sure you understand that. And then we have this concept called minimum viable population. All right, with minimum viable population, what we're talking about is what is basically the lowest population that we can have and have that species continue to be sustainable. And what happens is, I put this graph up here because I wanted you to take a look at this concept of minimum viable populations. It's written in your notes quite well. Okay. And the idea is when we have a species that needs to recover, what is the minimum population that needs to be out in nature in order for the species to continue? If it falls below this minimum viable population, what we're saying is that there are too many pressures, that the species just aren't enough individuals. If there's any type of huge bottleneck or some sort of change in the environment, there just aren't enough of them to make the adaptations needed to survive. Okay, and that's what we talk about. So in this graph, I just wanted to show you real quick. If you're looking at this is the amount of area within the park and the number of individuals within the population. So you can see that as the area gets less, no matter what species you're talking about here, the red, the blue, or the green, okay, you're going to have fewer. As the area in the park gets greater, you're going to have more species all the time. So the population's always up here. All right, but you look at the difference between them. And really what I'm looking for is the difference between a large carnivore and a small herbivore, or predator, prey. All right, prey is usually a generalist, okay, with a much higher biotic potential. And look what happens within the park area. Okay, this line represents the minimum viable population, and their minimum viable population is quite low if you look at it compared to over here the minimum viable population for a large carnivore. All right, so if you take a park area of say 10,000 hectares, here is the minimum viable population for the herbivores, and here is the minimum viable population for a large carnivore. And you see that you need fewer of them because the large carnivores are case strategists. They have very low biotic potential. Okay, they have very few offspring. There aren't going to be as big of a population. They're going to be a smaller population because also they are higher up on the food chain. So you need more of the smaller organisms, the herbivores. Okay, let's keep it going. That's minimum viable population. And what's kind of interesting to wrap this all up is the final concept is this idea that E.O. Wilson came up with, this island effect. Okay, and I just want to show you how this all works, to show you how species are going to be endangered or their populations will change based on how they move from mainland to islands. And we usually think of it as the founder effect when we talked about it, these natural selection taking place. If you take the mainland over here and I draw an island, a very large island next to the mainland, there's going to be some interaction between the mainland and this island, and species are going to be able to move back and forth. All right, and so what that means is when you have a large island, all right, close to a mainland where the species originate from, you're going to have be able to support more individuals of a given species, and you're less likely to suffer an extinction or have endangered species. Okay, because there is an easier way for these species to colonize that island. So you're going to end up with more species on there because it's easier to colonize. All right, and your extinction rate will be a little bit lower because you may have interaction between the island and the mainland. But what about a small island far away from the mainland? Now, in order for a species to get there, it has to travel quite a long distance. All right, if it doesn't swim, okay, or if the island's very far away, even if it flies, it's very difficult. So what happens is every once in a while you'll get a species that's, like I said, gets caught in a storm or something, drifts out here. It might be a plant seed, it might be a bird, it might be an animal, it might be an insect that's sitting on a piece of tree branch that came off the mainland, and it just by chance happened to hit this tiny little small island out here and became established. But what that does is it creates isolation. And so a small island far from the mainland is going to have much lower colonization rates and much greater potential for extinction because there's only a few number of a species that can survive on a small, limited resource island, meaning the carrying capacity is lower, and it doesn't have the ability to colonize or interact with the mainland. So a small island far away are the ones that probably are going to have the most endemic species, and that's what we see. The Hawaiian Islands are a great example. All right, and they just, once you lose them from that island, you won't find them anywhere else. Okay, so an island far from the mainland, fewer species, more likely to become extinct. And that's where we see a lot of our endangered species, on islands. Okay? Wow. That was an awful lot of information. I can't believe how much. So you might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now. Maybe your brain hurts a little bit. Or maybe you've learned so much you feel like an expert and you're ready to tackle the rest of this course. Or after all this, you might be a little bit tired and you might start imagining things that aren't true. But I think the best thing to do is maybe go get something to eat now. All right? And walk away smiling, knowing that you know so much more about wildlife populations, and you'll be able to apply this to so many situations in our course and in life. So thank you, and we'll see you again soon.